Tonight, we begin not with gladiators or emperors, but with something far more treacherous and complicated: romance in ancient Rome. Because believe it or not, finding love in a world of public nudity, arranged marriages, and very literal slavery was somehow even more awkward than getting left on rid after sending a risky late-night text. From naked courtship in communal bathhouses to marriages negotiated like grain contracts, Roman romance was less about stolen glances and more about stolen dowries. Before we continue deeper into these ancient shadows, take a quiet moment to subscribe if these forgotten stories bring you peace. And if you're still drifting with us, let us know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. It's always fascinating to see who joins us from around the world as we wander through history's quieter moments. So settle yourself into something comfortable. Maybe pour yourself some wine. The Romans certainly would have. And let's journey back to a time when your love life depended less on chemistry and more on whether your father could afford enough olive oil to make you marriageable. Picture this. You're standing in the heart of Rome. The year is 150 CE, and the empire stretches from the foggy hills of Britannia to the sun-baked sands of Egypt. The Forum Romanum bustles around you with the controlled chaos of the world's greatest city. Marble columns tower overhead, their surfaces carved with victories that span continents. The air is thick with the scent of burning incense from nearby temples, the sharp tang of fermented fish sauce, and something you can't quite identify but definitely don't want to step in. But you're not here for politics or commerce. You're here because you're young, Roman, and foolishly optimistic about love. Maybe you've caught sight of someone across the crowded marketplace, their toga draped just so, their profile catching the Mediterranean light in a way that makes your heart skip like a poorly thrown discus. You think to yourself, surely in the greatest civilization the world has ever known, romance must be sophisticated, refined, elegant. You're about to discover just how wrong you are. See, if you think modern dating is complicated, with its apps and algorithms and 3-day texting rules, then Roman romance is going to feel like trying to navigate the Circus Maximus during a particularly violent chariot race, while blindfolded on foot and carrying someone else's marriage contract. The Romans, for all their engineering marvels and philosophical achievements, approached love with the same methodical precision they used to build aqueducts and conquer barbarians. Which is to say, it was efficient, practical, and involved a surprising amount of paperwork. Romance, as you understand it, doesn't really exist. What exists instead is a complex web of social obligations, financial negotiations, and family politics that would make a Byzantine emperor's court look like a casual dinner party. Your romantic destiny was likely sealed before you could walk properly. If you're lucky enough to be born into a wealthy family, your marriage has already been discussed, debated, and quite possibly finalized by men in togas who've never asked you what you find attractive in a person. If you're from the working classes, you have slightly more freedom, but only in the way that choosing between bread and circuses is freedom when you can't afford both. And if you happen to be enslaved, which in Rome is entirely possible regardless of your intelligence, beauty, or charm, then your romantic life belongs to someone else entirely, along with every other aspect of your existence. Your heart, your body, your future children, all property of whoever happened to purchase you at the last slave market. But let's say you're free, reasonably well-born, and cautiously optimistic about finding love in this marble-clad metropolis. You'll quickly discover that Roman courtship operates by rules so intricate, they make the legal code look simple. There are protocols for everything: how to look at someone without causing scandal, how to send a message without involving the entire extended family, how to touch someone's hand without accidentally proposing marriage or committing a crime against public decency. The city around you is a constant reminder of these complexities. Every street corner features shrines to Venus, the goddess of love, her image carved in stone and painted in vivid colors that catch your eye like ancient advertisements for romance. But Venus, you'll learn, is a capricious deity. She might bless you with passion, but she's just as likely to curse you with desire for someone completely inappropriate, like your master's wife, your best friend's betrothed, or worse yet, someone from a rival political family. The Roman calendar itself seems designed to complicate romance. Nishu bors amuse to bow, which er forbelies numersamal dip and defoldal. There are days when marriages are forbidden, days when certain classes can't interact, days when the gods supposedly frown upon new relationships. The priests have opinions about everything. The augurs read omens in bird flights that might affect your love life. And the family ancestors whose death masks stare down at you from the walls of your home seem to have posthumous preferences about your romantic choices. And then there are the practical considerations that would never occur to a modern romantic. In Rome, love isn't just personal, it's political. Your choice of partner reflects on your family's status, your father's business connections, your clan's ancient rivalries. That attractive person catching your eye across the forum might be charming, intelligent and available, but if their family once opposed yours in a Senate vote, or if their grandfather insulted yours at a public banquet, then romance becomes treason. The very architecture of the city reinforces these social boundaries. The Palatine Hill, where the wealthy and powerful live in their sprawling villas, might as well be another world from the crowded insulae, where the working classes are stacked 5 stories high. Cross those invisible boundaries for love, and you're not just changing neighborhoods, you're attempting to reshape the social order that holds the empire together. But perhaps most bewildering of all is how public everything is in Roman society. Privacy, as you might understand it, doesn't really exist. Your servants know everything, your neighbors watch everything, and the entire extended family has opinions about everything. In a world where even bathing is a communal activity, where dinner parties involve reclining on couches together, while discussing the day's gossip, where marriages are celebrated with processions through the streets, the idea of a quiet, private courtship is about as realistic as a chariot race with just one participant. So as you stand there in the forum watching the endless stream of citizens, slaves, merchants and soldiers flow past like a human river, remember this. You're not just looking for love. You're looking for love within a system designed by politicians, regulated by priests, monitored by families, and enforced by social pressures that can make or break not just your happiness, but your entire future. Welcome to Roman romance, where passion meets politics, where desire encounters dynasty, and where the heart wants what the heart wants. But the family, the law, and the gods all have very different ideas about what the heart should be allowed to have. So you think you understand how romance works. You've seen the paintings, read the poetry, heard the stories of passionate Roman lovers meeting under moonlit colonnades. Time for a reality check that's going to hit harder than a gladiator's net. Dating as you know it simply doesn't exist in ancient Rome. There's no casual getting to know each other, no coffee dates, no long walks to see if you're compatible. Instead, think of Roman romance as a carefully choreographed political dance performed by people who've never asked if you can actually dance. Let's start with who's actually making the decisions about your love life. Spoiler alert, it's not you. If you're a young Roman man from a respectable family, your father, the paterfamilias, holds what's called patria potestas over you. This isn't just parental guidance, it's absolute legal authority that extends to every aspect of your life, including who you marry, when you marry, and how many dowry negotiations he's willing to endure before settling on someone's daughter. Your father can literally sell you into slavery if he wants to, so his opinions about your romantic preferences tend to carry significant weight. Your mother has opinions too, of course, but her role is more subtle. She's the one gathering intelligence about eligible families, assessing the reputations of potential matches, and occasionally vetoing someone because their grandmother once insulted her at a public festival. Roman mothers are like ancient social media algorithms. They know everything about everyone, and they're constantly calculating compatibility based on factors you didn't even know mattered. If you're a Roman woman, the situation is even more constrained. The practical result of all this complexity: Romans become experts at reading social signals, understanding family politics, and navigating romantic situations that require the diplomatic skills of a provincial governor. You learn to communicate interest through glances, gifts, and intermediaries. You develop a sophisticated understanding of which relationships are possible, which are risky, and which are career-ending. So when you see that attractive person across the forum, your first thought isn't, "How can I get to know them better?" It's, "What's their family status? Who are their political connections? And would my father consider this alliance advantageous or catastrophic?" Romance in Rome requires thinking like a strategist, negotiating like a merchant, and hoping like a gambler that the gods of love are feeling generous. So you've accepted that Roman romance operates more like a business merger than a fairy tale. Now comes the truly sobering question. What do you actually need to participate in this elaborate system? Because in Rome, love might be blind, but marriage has perfect vision when it comes to counting coins. Let's start with the brutal truth. If you can't afford to play the game, you're not getting a seat at the table. Think of Roman courtship as an exclusive club where the membership fees are calculated in olive groves, urban properties, and the occasional herd of prize cattle. If you're a young Roman man with romantic aspirations, you'd better hope your father has been financially responsible, because your attractiveness as a marriage candidate is directly proportional to your family's asset portfolio. You need land, not just a small plot for growing vegetables, but enough productive farmland to support a household, pay taxes, and survive the occasional bad harvest. You need a house in the city, preferably one that doesn't share walls with a tavern or a brothel, and definitely one that has enough rooms to accommodate the extended family members who will inevitably move in after various financial disasters. But property is just the beginning. You need liquid wealth too, coined money that can be counted, weighed, and verified by suspicious future in-laws. You need enough cash reserves to pay for wedding ceremonies that can cost more than most people earn in a year, dowry supplements that might be demanded during negotiations, and the inevitable gifts to various family members who need to be convinced that this alliance is in everyone's best interests. Your professional prospects matter enormously. If you're planning a political career, you need connections, mentors, and enough financial backing to afford the expenses of running for office, which in Rome means paying for public games, festivals, and feasts that demonstrate your worthiness to represent the people. If you're going into business, you need startup capital and trade connections. If you're planning a military career, you need enough money to buy your own equipment and survive on irregular pay while you're campaigning in places where the local specialty is trying to kill Romans. For Roman women, the financial requirements are different but equally demanding. Your family needs to provide a dowry dose that's substantial enough to demonstrate their serious commitment to the marriage alliance. This isn't pocket money. It's often the equivalent of several years' income for a working family. The dowry might include coined money, jewelry, household goods, slaves, or even property deeds. Your father has been calculating and saving for this since you were born, and the size of your dowry directly affects the quality of marriage proposals you'll receive. But money alone isn't enough. You need social credentials that can't be purchased at any market. Your family lineage matters enormously. Romans are obsessed with ancestry, and they can trace bloodlines with the precision of professional genealogists. If your great-grandfather was a respected senator, that enhances your marriage value. If he was convicted of embezzling public funds, that's a permanent stain that affects your prospects for generations. Your family's reputation for virtue is scrutinized like evidence in a legal case. Have there been any scandals? Any divorces that ended badly? Any relatives who've been caught in compromising situations with inappropriate partners? Roman society has a long memory for gossip, and what your cousin did at a wine festival 5 years ago can still affect your marriage negotiations today. Religious standing adds another layer of complexity. Your family needs to maintain proper relationships with the gods through regular sacrifices, temple donations, and participation in public festivals. If you've somehow offended the deities, or if people think you have, that's considered a serious liability. Nobody wants their family alliance cursed by divine displeasure, especially when crop failures and military defeats can be blamed on religious negligence. Military service creates its own set of requirements and complications. If you're a Roman citizen of the appropriate class, you're expected to serve in the legions for at least 6 years. This means your romantic timeline is partially controlled by military logistics. You can't marry while you're actively campaigning, and even when you return, you need time to readjust to civilian life and establish your post-service career. Some families prefer their daughters to marry veterans who've proven their courage and discipline, but others worry about men who've spent years in military camps where entertainment options were limited and not particularly refined. Education and cultural refinement are increasingly important, especially among the upper classes. You're expected to speak eloquently, write passable poetry, understand philosophy well enough to hold dinner party conversations, and demonstrate familiarity with Greek literature and culture. If you can't quote Homer appropriately, or discuss Stoic philosophy without embarrassing yourself, you're at a significant disadvantage in social situations where marriage alliances are formed. Physical health and appearance matter more than romantic literature suggests. Roman families are practical about genetics and fertility. If you have obvious physical disabilities, chronic illnesses, or even persistent skin conditions, these become factors in marriage calculations. Beauty is appreciated, but Roman pragmatism means that healthy, fertile partners who can produce strong children are valued over stunning individuals who might not survive childbirth or plague years. Geographic considerations add yet another complication. If your family's primary holdings are in distant provinces, that affects your marriage prospects in the capital. Some families prefer local alliances that keep property and political influence concentrated in familiar territory. Others see provincial connections as opportunities for expanding their influence and diversifying their economic interests. Age creates its own barriers and opportunities. If you're a woman past the typical marriage age, say over 20, you're considered less desirable unless you bring exceptional wealth or connections to compensate. If you're a man under 30, many families will consider you too young and financially unstable for their daughters. The timing has to align not just with your personal readiness, but with the broader family strategies of both sides. And finally, there's the most unpredictable requirement of all political alignment. In a world where civil wars can erupt over succession disputes or policy disagreements, your family's political loyalties become romantic factors. If your father supported the wrong candidate in the last election, or if your family has historical ties to political losers, that can make you unmarriageable to families on the winning side, at least until the political landscape shifts again. So before you even think about romance, ask yourself, do you have the wealth, status, health, education, military service, religious standing, family reputation and political connections necessary to be considered a viable marriage candidate? Because in Rome, love might move mountains, but first you need to prove you can afford the surveying costs. Welcome to the most sophisticated theatre production in the ancient world, where every performance is a romantic audition and nobody gets to see the script in advance. Roman courtship isn't dating, it's performance art with life-altering consequences. If you're fortunate enough to be born into the upper classes, you'll encounter something that makes medieval courtly love look like a casual backyard barbecue. The elaborate world of Roman social rituals designed to showcase marriageable individuals while maintaining the illusion that this isn't actually a livestock auction for humans. Let's start with the most important venue for romantic theatre, the dinner party, or convivium. These aren't casual gatherings where you bring wine and hope for the best. These are carefully orchestrated social events where every detail from the seating arrangement to the conversation topics is designed to display family wealth, cultural sophistication, and the marriageable qualities of eligible young people. Picture yourself as a young Roman woman attending one of these elaborate performances. You've spent hours being prepared by slaves who specialize in creating the perfect appearance, your hair arranged in the latest fashion, your stole draped to suggest elegance without ostentation, your jewelry calculated to demonstrate wealth without appearing vulgar. You recline on a couch next to other women, picking delicately at exotic foods while pretending not to notice the young men on the opposite couches who are supposed to be impressed by your refinement. The conversation follows unwritten rules as complex as legal procedures. You're expected to demonstrate intelligence without appearing too learned, show interest in appropriate topics without expressing controversial opinions, and maintain an air of modest availability without seeming eager. It's like performing in a play where everyone knows their general role but the specific dialogue is improvised and a wrong line could end your romantic prospects permanently. The men face their own performative challenges. They must display wit without arrogance, wealth without vulgarity, and romantic interest without impropriety. They recite poetry, not their own because that would be presumptuous, but carefully selected verses that demonstrate their cultural education while hinting at their romantic sensibilities. They discuss military campaigns they've participated in, but modestly. They mention their family's political connections, but subtly. It's a delicate balance between self-promotion and humility that requires years of practice. But the dinner party is just one stage in this elaborate theatre. There are also religious festivals where young people can interact under the socially acceptable pretense of honoring the gods. The Festival of Venus, for instance, becomes an opportunity for carefully chaperoned romantic displays. Young women offer flowers at the goddess's shrine while eligible men happen to be offering their own devotions nearby. Eye contact that would be scandalous in other contexts becomes religiously appropriate, and conversations about divine favor can carry subtly romantic undertones. The public baths present perhaps the most bizarre romantic theater in Roman society. Yes, these are communal facilities where people bathe naked together, but don't mistake this for some kind of ancient dating free-for-all. The baths operate according to strict social protocols that make royal court etiquette look relaxed. Different sections of the bath complex are designated for different social classes and genders, though there's enough controlled mixing to create opportunities for carefully orchestrated encounters. A young man might time his visit to coincide with when eligible women from appropriate families are likely to be present. But the performance required is extraordinary. You must appear interested without staring, attractive without being obvious, available without seeming desperate, all while naked and surrounded by steam slaves and other people's family members. The conversations in bath settings follow their own elaborate codes. You might discuss the temperature of the water while actually negotiating interest levels. You might compliment someone's choice of oils while gathering information about their family's financial status. The entire interaction is a multi-layered performance where every gesture, glance, and casual comment carries potential romantic significance. Athletic competitions and gladiatorial games create another stage for romantic display. Young men use these events to demonstrate their physical prowess and social connections, while women attend in carefully planned arrangements that allow them to be seen by eligible bachelors. The seating at the Circus Maximus isn't random. Families position themselves strategically to maximize romantic visibility while maintaining social propriety. Even the simple act of walking through the forum becomes a performance opportunity. Romans develop elaborate promenade rituals where eligible young people parade through public spaces at specific times, dressed in their finest clothing, accompanied by appropriate chaperones, following routes designed to maximize encounters with suitable potential partners. It's like a daily fashion show combined with a marriage market, where your ability to walk gracefully while managing a complex toga arrangement demonstrates your worthiness as a spouse. The poetry performances that accompany these social rituals are particularly fascinating because they allow for emotional expression within acceptable bounds. A young man might recite verses about love and longing, ostensibly as an artistic exercise, while actually conveying romantic interest to a specific listener. The audience pretends to appreciate the literary merit while actually evaluating the romantic implications. It's a way of being passionate and proper simultaneously. Gift giving becomes another elaborate performance art. The presents exchanged during these social rituals must be valuable enough to demonstrate serious interest, but appropriate enough to avoid suggesting impropriety. A piece of jewelry might be too forward, but a beautifully bound scroll of poetry could be perfect. Exotic foods from distant provinces show wealth and sophistication, while handmade items demonstrate personal attention and skill. Throughout all these performances, everyone involved must maintain the fiction that this isn't actually about marriage negotiations. The young people are supposed to be enjoying innocent social interactions, the families are supposed to be fostering cultural refinement, and the romantic possibilities are supposed to be happy coincidences rather than the entire point of the elaborate theatrical production. The most skilled performers in this system become legendary for their ability to convey complex romantic messages through seemingly innocent social interactions. They develop reputations for elegance, wit, and appropriate availability that make them highly sought after at social events. They're not just looking for spouses, they're creating personal brands that will affect their entire family's social standing. But remember, this is all performance. Behind the elegant poetry and refined conversation, sharp-eyed chaperones are taking notes. Family representatives are conducting discreet background investigations, and financial calculations are being made that will determine whether all this beautiful theatre will result in actual marriage negotiations or just expensive entertainment. Welcome to Roman romance, where love might be the goal but performance is the method, and the reviews determine your entire future. So you've mastered the art of Roman social performance, but now comes the truly delicate challenge. How do you actually communicate romantic interest in a society where saying the wrong thing to the wrong person can result in exile, family feuds, or accidentally proposing marriage to someone's sister? Welcome to the ancient world's most sophisticated system of coded communication, where every gesture carries meaning and every gift might be a declaration of war. Romans have elevated indirect communication to an art form that would make modern diplomats weep with envy. You can't simply walk up to someone and say, "I find you attractive." That's about as socially acceptable as showing up to a Senate meeting in your undergarments. Instead, you must learn to speak in symbols, gestures, and carefully chosen objects that convey complex emotional messages while maintaining plausible deniability. Let's start with the most basic level: eye contact. This isn't the casual glancing you might think. Roman society has developed an entire vocabulary of looks that can communicate everything from mild interest to serious romantic intent to "your father and my father need to have a conversation immediately." A direct gaze held for exactly the right amount of time can signal availability. Too brief and you seem disinterested. Too long and you're being inappropriately forward. The perfect duration of meaningful eye contact has been calculated by generations of Roman romantics to be roughly the time it takes to silently count to 3, but only if the other person is also counting. Then there's the complex world of gestural communication. The way you arrange your toga can send messages. A fold adjusted just so might indicate you're open to conversation. The angle at which you hold your head during religious ceremonies can suggest romantic availability. Even the way you handle your wine cup at dinner parties carries potential romantic significance. Romans become experts at reading these subtle physical cues, developing an almost supernatural ability to detect romantic interest from across a crowded forum. But the real sophistication comes with the exchange of symbolic objects, a system so elaborate it makes modern gift-giving look like amateur hour. These aren't random presents, they're carefully chosen communications that require extensive cultural knowledge to decode properly. Flowers, for instance, aren't just pretty decorations. Different blooms carry specific meanings that change depending on the season, the circumstances of giving, and even the time of day they're presented. Roses given during the festival of Venus might indicate serious romantic interest, while the same roses presented at a family funeral could be expressing sympathy with romantic undertones. Lilies suggest purity and respect, but they can also imply that you consider the recipient worthy of marriage consideration. Violets are for modest admiration, but only if they're fresh. Wilted violets suggest your interest is fading. The jewelry exchange system is even more complex. A simple ring given at the right moment can function as an unofficial engagement declaration, but the wrong ring at the wrong time might accidentally insult someone's family status. Bracelets are for serious courtship interest, but only if they're made from appropriate materials. Gold suggests wealth and long-term commitment. Silver indicates respect, but might imply you're not quite ready for formal negotiations. Bronze. Well, bronze might suggest you're either being economical or you don't consider the recipient worth precious metals. Books and scrolls create their own communication category. Lending someone a scroll of poetry isn't just sharing literature, it's making a statement about your educational compatibility and cultural values. But which poems you choose matters enormously. Ovid's love poetry is passionate but risky, potentially suggesting you have inappropriate thoughts. Virgil's epic verses demonstrate classical education but might seem too serious for romantic contexts. Greek philosophical texts show intellectual depth but could imply you think the recipient needs moral instruction. The food gift system requires encyclopedic knowledge of social meanings. Honey cakes suggest sweetness and domestic harmony. Imported delicacies demonstrate wealth and sophistication. Wine from your family's own vineyards indicates serious consideration for long-term alliance. But exotic spices might be too forward, suggesting passionate desires that proper Romans should keep private. Fruits are generally safe, unless they're figs, which carry unfortunate sexual connotations that could end your courtship prospects permanently. Perfumes and oils occupy their own special category of romantic communication. These are expensive, intimate gifts that suggest you've been thinking about the recipient's personal comfort and attractiveness. But the scents you choose send specific messages. Rose oil suggests romantic love. Jasmine indicates passion but might be too intense for early courtship. Cedar and sandalwood demonstrate refined taste and wealth. Lavender suggests domestic tranquility and might be appropriate for more serious relationship discussions. But here's where it gets truly complicated. All these symbolic communications must be delivered through intermediaries because direct gift giving between unmarried young people can be scandalous. You need to develop a network of trusted servants, family, friends, and social connections who can deliver your carefully chosen symbolic messages while maintaining the fiction that these are casual social gestures rather than calculated romantic communications. The servants who specialize in this kind of discreet message delivery become enormously valuable and develop reputations for reliability and discretion. Some are known for their ability to time deliveries perfectly, ensuring that symbolic gifts arrive at exactly the right moment during social gatherings. Others are praised for their skill at reading recipients' reactions and reporting back detailed information about how messages were received. The entire system requires both participants to be operating from the same cultural knowledge base. If you send roses and the recipient interprets them as mere decorative flowers, your romantic signal fails completely. If you offer a philosophy scroll and they think you're suggesting they need intellectual improvement, you've accidentally insulted them. Successful Roman courtship requires not just emotional intelligence but extensive education in the symbolic meaning systems that make coded communication possible. And then there are the seasonal variations that add yet another layer of complexity. Gifts that are appropriate during spring festivals might be completely wrong during autumn ceremonies. Summer courtship symbols differ from winter ones. Even the phases of the moon can affect the interpretation of symbolic communications because Romans believe celestial influences affect romantic receptivity. The most skilled practitioners of this communication art develop reputations that extend far beyond their immediate social circles. Families seek them out as potential matches not just because of their wealth or status, but because their ability to navigate complex symbolic systems demonstrates the kind of cultural sophistication that makes for successful marriages among the educated classes. But remember, every symbolic communication is being observed, interpreted, and discussed by extended networks of family members, servants, and social connections. Your carefully chosen romantic symbols aren't private communications. They're public statements about your intentions, judgment, and cultural competence that will be analyzed and remembered for years to come. Think modern social media has eliminated privacy. That's adorable. Welcome to ancient Rome, where surveillance is so thorough that your romantic life is monitored by more people than a gladiatorial match, and everyone has opinions about your personal business that they're not shy about sharing. In Roman society, the concept of private courtship is about as realistic as a chariot race with invisible horses. From the moment you show the slightest romantic interest in someone, you've activated a surveillance network that would make modern intelligence agencies jealous. Every glance, every conversation, every symbolic gift exchange is being observed, recorded, and analyzed by people whose full-time job seems to be managing other people's love lives. Let's start with your own household, which functions like a romantic intelligence agency with unlimited access to your daily activities. Your slaves know everything, and I mean everything. They dress you, they accompany you to social events, they handle your correspondence, they manage your schedule. They know when you spend extra time preparing for certain social gatherings. They notice when you ask about specific families. They observe your reactions when particular names are mentioned in conversation. And here's the thing about slaves in wealthy Roman households: they're not just servants, they're often educated, intelligent people who understand social dynamics perfectly. Some become trusted confidants and advisors about romantic matters. Others report every detail to your parents because their loyalty lies with the family's interests rather than your personal desires. You never know which category your personal slaves fall into until it's too late. Your parents have deployed their own intelligence network that spans the entire social landscape of Rome. Your mother maintains connections with other women who specialize in gathering information about eligible families. They know which daughters are being courted, which sons are considered good prospects, which families are experiencing financial difficulties that might affect marriage negotiations. Roman matrons are like ancient social media influencers crossed with private investigators. They know everyone, they hear everything, and they remember details that happened decades ago. Your father has his own information sources through business connections, political associations, and military networks. He knows which families are politically reliable, which ones have hidden debts, which patriarchs are difficult to negotiate with, and which bloodlines carry genetic or behavioral problems that might affect grandchildren. Roman men discuss their children's romantic prospects with the same strategic intensity they bring to military campaigns or commercial ventures. But family surveillance is just the beginning. Roman society operates on the principle that marriage affects entire communities, so neighbors, friends, and extended social networks all consider themselves stakeholders in your romantic decisions. The other families in your neighborhood are watching your courtship activities because your choice of spouse reflects on the social status of the entire area. If you marry beneath your station, it suggests the neighborhood's standards are declining. If you marry above it, everyone wants to understand how your family managed the social climb. Religious authorities add another layer of oversight that combines spiritual guidance with social control. Priests and priestesses don't just perform religious ceremonies, they monitor the moral behavior of community members, including romantic conduct. They have opinions about appropriate marriage timing, suitable partner choices, and proper courtship behavior. Some temples function as informal matchmaking centers, where religious officials help facilitate introductions between suitable families. But this means your romantic life becomes subject to religious scrutiny and guidance. The patron-client system creates additional surveillance networks that extend across social classes. If your family has clients, people of lower social status who depend on your support, they're expected to report information about your activities and reputation. If your family are clients of more powerful patrons, your romantic choices become subjects of interest to people who can significantly affect your family's social and economic prospects. Public spaces in Rome are designed to facilitate social observation rather than privacy. The forum, the baths, the theaters, even religious temples are arranged so that people can see and be seen. Social interactions happen in full view of crowds that include family representatives, business associates, and casual observers who might report interesting developments to interested parties. Romans become experts at conducting meaningful conversations while surrounded by eavesdroppers, and they develop sophisticated abilities to read social situations from across crowded spaces. The legal system reinforces this social surveillance by making families legally responsible for their members' romantic choices. If you marry someone inappropriate, your father can face social and legal consequences. If you conduct yourself improperly during courtship, it reflects on your entire family's reputation and can affect their business dealings, political prospects, and social standing for generations. Even the physical architecture of Roman homes is designed to minimize privacy. Houses are built around central courtyards where family activities can be observed by household members. Bedrooms open onto common areas. Gardens and dining spaces are arranged so that conversations can be overheard from multiple locations. The idea of a private space where young people might conduct romantic conversations without supervision is largely foreign to Roman domestic architecture. Professional matchmakers and marriage brokers add yet another layer of organized surveillance to the system. These specialists maintain detailed information about eligible individuals, family backgrounds, financial situations, and romantic histories. They function as combination dating services and intelligence agencies, using their knowledge networks to facilitate appropriate matches while preventing unsuitable alliances. The result is a system where your romantic life becomes a community project managed by dozens of interested parties who all consider themselves qualified to offer opinions, guidance, and ultimately approval or disapproval of your choices. Privacy isn't just rare in Roman romance, it's actively discouraged as socially irresponsible and potentially dangerous to community stability. So you're being watched by everyone from your personal slaves to your neighbor's grandmother, but your heart insists on wanting what it wants, preferably someone your family would consider scandalous, inappropriate, or politically catastrophic. Welcome to the thriving underground world of Roman romantic rebellion, where love letters are smuggled like contraband and secret meetings require the planning skills of a military campaign. Despite all the surveillance and social control, Romans have developed an impressive network of covert romantic activities that would make resistance fighters proud, because when you're dealing with a system this rigid, some people inevitably become experts at working around it. Let's start with the secret letter network, which operates like an ancient postal service designed specifically for messages that would horrify your parents. These aren't casual notes, they're carefully crafted communications that must convey complex emotional content while being written in code sophisticated enough to survive interception and examination by suspicious family members. The language of Roman love letters has evolved into something approaching diplomatic encryption. Writers develop elaborate metaphorical systems where discussing agricultural matters might actually be describing romantic feelings, or where references to religious devotion could be passionate declarations disguised as piety. A letter about needing advice on household management might actually be asking for a secret meeting, while concerns about seasonal changes could be expressing worry about family interference. The delivery systems for these messages require networks of trusted intermediaries who understand both the importance of discretion and the severe consequences of discovery. Some slaves specialize in this kind of covert message delivery, developing reputations for reliability that make them valuable to multiple families simultaneously. They learn to move through the city unnoticed, to time deliveries when recipients are likely to be alone, and to destroy evidence if interception seems likely. Free servants and lower-class associates also participate in these networks, sometimes for payment, sometimes for their own romantic reasons, and sometimes just for the excitement of participating in elite romantic dramas. A baker's apprentice might agree to deliver messages between customers, a temple attendant might facilitate communication during religious ceremonies, or a public bath worker might help arrange accidental encounters in steam-filled rooms where conversations can't easily be overheard. Secret meeting locations require even more careful planning than message delivery. Romans become experts at identifying spaces where they can have private conversations without triggering the surveillance networks that monitor their regular activities. Gardens during religious festivals offer opportunities for brief encounters disguised as accidental meetings. Certain shops and workshops become known as safe spaces where young people can have conversations while pretending to conduct business transactions. The public baths, despite their apparent lack of privacy, actually offer some of the best opportunities for covert romantic communication. The constant steam, the background noise of conversations and splashing water, and the social acceptability of being in the same space create conditions where careful whispered conversations can occur without detection. Romans developed techniques for timing their bath visits to coincide with those of romantic interests, and they learned to communicate through gestures and glances that can be dismissed as casual social interaction if observed. Religious ceremonies provide another category of secret meeting opportunities that combine romantic rebellion with apparent piety. Certain temples and festivals create situations where young people from different families can interact without raising suspicions. The crowds, the ritual activities, and the socially acceptable nature of religious participation provide cover for romantic communications that would be scandalous in other contexts. But the most sophisticated underground romantic activities involve elaborate deception campaigns that require multiple conspirators and careful coordination. A young woman might arrange to visit a female friend but actually spend time with a male romantic interest who happens to be visiting the friend's brother. A young man might claim to be studying philosophy with a tutor but actually be meeting with someone whose family has forbidden the relationship. These deception campaigns often involve entire networks of friends, sympathetic relatives, and hired accomplices who provide alibis, create diversions, and help maintain the fiction that nothing romantic is occurring. Some wealthy families unknowingly employ servants who specialize in facilitating these covert romantic activities because the servants' loyalty lies with whoever pays them rather than with the family's official moral standards. The financial aspects of underground romance create their own complications and opportunities. Secret romantic relationships require funding for gifts, bribes, and payments to various accomplices who help maintain privacy. Some young Romans develop elaborate schemes for diverting money from household budgets or family allowances to support their covert romantic activities. Others form partnerships with merchants or artisans who help disguise romantic gifts as ordinary commercial transactions. Literary and artistic activities provide another avenue for secret romantic expression that operates under the cover of cultural sophistication. Poetry readings, musical performances, and artistic gatherings create opportunities for emotional expression and communication that can be dismissed as aesthetic appreciation if questioned. Romans learned to embed romantic messages in apparently innocent cultural activities using artistic metaphors and literary references to convey feelings that would be scandalous if expressed directly. The most daring participants in underground romance develop reputations that spread through whispered networks of similarly rebellious individuals. They become legendary for their ability to conduct passionate relationships while maintaining appearances of proper social behavior. Their techniques and strategies are studied and copied by others who find themselves in similarly constrained romantic situations. But every participant in these underground activities understands that discovery carries serious consequences that extend far beyond personal embarrassment. Families can be ruined, political alliances destroyed, and individual futures completely redirected by romantic scandals that violate social expectations and challenge the established order that keeps Roman society functioning. After all that skulking around temples and bribing servants for secret message delivery, you'll be relieved to know that Roman society does provide some officially approved opportunities for romantic interaction. Think of these as government-sanctioned dating events where you can flirt legally as long as you follow approximately 700 unwritten rules and don't mind being supervised by half the city. The most important of these blessed occasions are the religious festivals, which Romans have cleverly designed to serve double duty as both divine worship and socially acceptable matchmaking opportunities. The festival of Venus Verticordia, for instance, is theoretically about asking the goddess to protect Roman women's virtue. In practice, it becomes an elaborate showcase where young women can display their piety, beauty, and marriageability, while young men demonstrate their devotion to appropriate goddesses and their ability to make impressive religious donations. During these festivals, the normal rules of social interaction are temporarily relaxed, creating a sort of romantic carnival atmosphere where behaviors that would be scandalous in everyday life become religiously acceptable. Young people can speak directly to each other while offering prayers, exchange meaningful glances while participating in processions, and even touch hands briefly while making joint offerings to the gods. It's like divine permission for carefully controlled flirtation. The Floralia festival presents perhaps the most interesting example of sanctioned romantic relaxation. Dedicated to Flora, the goddess of flowers and spring, this celebration traditionally allows for more physical interaction and playful behavior than in most Roman social events. Young people exchange flower crowns, participate in group dances, and engage in games that involve carefully choreographed physical contact. The religious justification honoring the fertility aspects of the goddess provides cover for romantic interactions that would otherwise require months of family negotiations. Wedding celebrations create another category of approved romantic opportunity, though they come with their own complex social dynamics. When you attend someone else's wedding, you're expected to participate in the general atmosphere of romantic celebration, which means marriage-minded families use these events as informal matchmaking opportunities. Young people can dance together, share food and wine, and engage in conversations about love and marriage without appearing to pursue inappropriate relationships. But wedding receptions also function as competitive romantic displays where eligible individuals perform for the assembled families who might be evaluating them as potential matches for their own children. Your behavior at weddings becomes part of your romantic reputation: how gracefully you dance, how wittily you converse, how appropriately you handle wine and social interaction. Roman wedding guests become experts at using these events to advertise their marriageability while gathering intelligence about other families' romantic plans. Public games and gladiatorial contests provide yet another venue for sanctioned romantic theatre, though the dynamics are quite different from religious festivals. The amphitheatre seating arrangements are carefully organized by social class and family connections, creating opportunities for strategic romantic positioning. Families can ensure their eligible young people are visible to appropriate potential matches while demonstrating their wealth through the quality of their seats and the lavishness of their event attendance. The emotional intensity of gladiatorial combat creates an atmosphere where passionate reactions are socially acceptable, giving young people permission to display strong feelings that might be inappropriate in other contexts. A young woman can gasp dramatically at exciting moments, clutch her companion's arm during tense fights, and engage in animated discussions about the competitor's skills and attractiveness, all while being observed by potential suitors who are evaluating her emotional responsiveness and social reactions. Athletic competitions and chariot races function similarly, providing socially acceptable venues for displaying physical appreciation and competitive spirit. Young men can demonstrate their own athletic abilities through participation, while young women can show appropriate enthusiasm for masculine achievements. The public nature of these events means that romantic reactions become part of a broader social performance that families can observe and evaluate. The theatre presents perhaps the most sophisticated of these sanctioned romantic opportunities, because dramatic performances create emotional experiences that young people can share while maintaining social propriety. Watching tragic love stories unfold on stage gives audiences permission to experience and discuss romantic emotions in a culturally acceptable context. Post-performance discussions about the themes, characters, and emotional impact of plays become opportunities for romantic communication disguised as intellectual discourse. Market days and commercial festivals create more casual opportunities for romantic interaction that operate under the cover of practical household activities. Young women shopping for household goods can encounter young men conducting family business, creating situations where brief conversations about prices, quality, and availability can carry romantic subtexts. The commercial context provides natural conversation topics while the public setting ensures appropriate supervision. Religious processions offer some of the most elaborate opportunities for sanctioned romantic display, as these events combine divine worship with community celebration in ways that showcase eligible young people to their best advantage. Participants dress in their finest clothing, demonstrate their religious devotion, and participate in community activities that display their social connections and cultural sophistication. But even these officially approved romantic opportunities come with strict behavioral guidelines that participants must navigate carefully. The line between appropriate festival flirtation and scandalous behavior is clearly defined, and crossing it can result in social consequences that extend far beyond the immediate event. Families assign trusted relatives to monitor their young people's behavior during these occasions, ensuring that temporary social relaxation doesn't lead to permanent romantic commitments that haven't been properly negotiated. The key to successfully using these sanctioned opportunities lies in understanding that they're still fundamentally performances designed to facilitate family matchmaking rather than individual romantic choice. The freedom they provide is carefully controlled and ultimately serves the same social functions as the more restrictive everyday interactions. They just make the process more enjoyable for everyone involved. Now let's step away from the marble villas and elaborate dinner parties to see how romance works when you're not rich enough to afford a dozen slaves and a summer house in Gaul. Welcome to Love Among Rome's working population, where passion meets practicality and nobody has time for poetry competitions because there's grain to mill and bread to bake. If you're part of Rome's vast working class shopkeepers, craftsmen, laborers, freedmen, your approach to romance operates by completely different rules than the aristocratic theatre we've been exploring. This isn't because working-class Romans are less romantic, it's because they can't afford to treat marriage as a leisurely negotiation between family dynasties. When your livelihood depends on daily labor and your housing situation could change with the next economic downturn, romantic decisions become exercises in practical survival. For a working-class Roman man, your attractiveness as a marriage partner is measured not in estates and political connections, but in your ability to maintain steady employment and contribute to household economics. Can you practice your trade reliably? Do you have repeat customers who trust your work? Are you skilled enough to adapt when economic conditions change? A master carpenter with a solid reputation and his own tools is a much better marriage prospect than a senator's son with gambling debts, at least among families who understand the value of competent labor. Your courtship opportunities arise naturally from your work environment rather than through elaborate social events. If you're a blacksmith, you meet potential partners among the daughters of farmers who bring tools for repair, merchants who need metalwork for their shops, or other craftsmen whose businesses intersect with yours. If you work in the markets, you encounter young women who shop for their families, other vendors whose stalls neighbor yours, or domestic slaves who might eventually earn their freedom and become marriageable. These work-based romantic encounters have their own rhythm and customs that develop around the practical needs of commerce and production. A baker might offer the best bread to someone he's interested in courting, not as a grand romantic gesture but as a way of demonstrating the quality of his work and his ability to provide good food for a family. A weaver might create an especially fine piece of cloth as a gift, showcasing both her skill and her potential value as a household manager. The courtship timeline moves much faster in working-class romance because practical considerations don't allow for extended negotiations. If you're attracted to someone and the practical factors align, compatible work schedules, complementary skills, family approval, then marriage arrangements can be finalized in weeks rather than months. There's less time for elaborate symbolic communication and more emphasis on direct conversation about practical compatibility. Financial arrangements among working families are more straightforward but equally important. Instead of complex dowry negotiations involving property deeds and investment portfolios, working-class marriages focus on immediate practical contributions. A bride might bring household goods, basic tools, or savings accumulated from her own labor. A groom demonstrates his worthiness through evidence of steady income and professional competence rather than inherited wealth. Family involvement in working-class romance is still significant, but operates differently than aristocratic family politics. Parents focus on evaluating potential partners' work ethics, health, and ability to contribute to family economic security, rather than their political connections or cultural sophistication. A father might assess a suitor by observing his behavior in the workshop, his relationships with customers, or his reputation among other craftsmen. The social venues for working-class romantic interaction center around neighborhood life rather than city-wide social events. Local taverns become informal matchmaking locations where young people from nearby trades can meet and interact. Religious festivals and neighborhood temples provide romantic opportunities, but on a more intimate scale than the grand city-wide celebrations. Market days create natural meeting opportunities that don't require special arrangements or expensive preparations. Geographic considerations play a larger role in working-class romance because mobility is more limited. If your trade is location-specific, say you work in a particular mill or serve specific neighborhood customers, then your romantic options are largely determined by who lives and works in your immediate area. This creates tight-knit communities where everyone knows everyone else's romantic business, but it also limits options for young people who might prefer partners from different neighborhoods or social backgrounds. The seasonal rhythms of working life affect romantic timing in ways that aristocratic families don't experience. Harvest seasons, festival periods, and economic cycles determine when working families have time and resources for courtship activities. A grain merchant might conduct most of his romantic pursuits during harvest season when business is good, while a construction worker might have more time for courtship during winter months when building projects slow down. Working-class Roman marriages tend to be more genuinely collaborative partnerships because both spouses usually contribute essential economic functions to household survival. A baker's wife isn't just a decorative addition to the family. She might manage customer relations, handle financial records, or contribute her own specialized skills to the business operation. This practical interdependence can create stronger emotional bonds than marriages based primarily on social alliance. But working-class romance isn't without its own complications and restrictions. Economic instability can disrupt romantic plans just as effectively as political scandals affect aristocratic families. A failed harvest, a trade dispute, or changes in imperial policy can eliminate marriage possibilities or force difficult choices about romantic priorities versus survival needs. The key difference is that working-class Romans approach romance as one important element of building a sustainable life together, rather than as a separate romantic ideal that exists apart from practical considerations. Love and compatibility matter, but they're evaluated alongside questions of economic survival, family stability, and community integration that determine whether romantic attraction can realistically develop into lasting partnership. So you've survived the courtship theater, navigated the symbolic gift exchanges, and somehow convinced two families that joining their bloodlines won't result in economic disaster or social scandal. Congratulations. Now comes the truly romantic part, the legal documentation, property negotiations and contract disputes that transform Roman love into a binding civic institution overseen by lawyers, witnessed by half the neighborhood, and recorded in duplicate for posterity. Welcome to Roman marriage law, where passion meets paperwork and every romantic gesture must be legally defensible in court. Let's start with the engagement process, which Romans call sponsalia, because apparently even getting engaged requires an official Latin term that sounds like a legal proceeding. This isn't a private moment between two people who've decided they want to spend their lives together. This is a formal contract negotiation between family representatives who've been preparing for this discussion since the children were old enough to demonstrate marriageable qualities. The sponsalia ceremony involves both families gathering to formally announce their intention to create a marriage alliance. But before anyone starts celebrating, there's serious business to conduct. Property assessments must be completed, dowry amounts finalized, and legal documentation prepared that specifies exactly what each family is contributing to this union and what happens if things go wrong. The dowry negotiations alone can take weeks and involve more financial complexity than most modern business mergers. The bride's family must demonstrate their ability to provide the agreed-upon dos, the dowry that becomes part of the new household's assets. This might include coined money, jewelry, slaves, household goods, property deeds, or business interests. Everything must be evaluated, documented, and legally transferred according to procedures that protect both families' interests. But here's where Roman law gets particularly fascinating. The dowry doesn't actually belong to the husband, even though he controls it during the marriage. It remains technically the wife's property, managed by the husband but returnable to her family under certain circumstances. This creates a complex web of financial relationships that requires careful legal documentation to prevent future disputes. The groom's family must provide corresponding financial commitments that demonstrate their ability to support a wife and any future children. This might involve proving ownership of sufficient property, demonstrating stable income sources, or providing guarantees from other family members who agree to support the marriage financially if necessary. Once the financial arrangements are settled, the formal betrothal can proceed. This involves religious ceremonies where both families make oaths before the gods, exchange symbolic objects that represent their commitment, and formally announce the engagement to their social networks. The religious aspects aren't just ceremonial, they create spiritual obligations that Romans believe will be enforced by divine powers if violated. The time between betrothal and actual marriage can last anywhere from a few months to several years, depending on various practical factors. If the bride is very young, the families might wait until she reaches a more appropriate age. If the groom needs to complete military service or establish his career, the marriage might be delayed until he can properly support a household. If economic conditions are unfavorable, families might postpone the expensive wedding celebrations until circumstances improve. During this engagement period, both families begin the complex process of integrating their social and business networks. The bride's family starts introducing her to her future husband's relatives, business associates, and political connections. The groom begins learning about his future wife's family relationships, property holdings, and social obligations. It's like an extended internship in becoming part of each other's extended family systems. The actual wedding ceremony involves multiple legal procedures that transform the engagement contract into a binding marriage agreement. The religious elements, sacrifices to the appropriate gods, consultations with augurs about divine approval, ceremonial exchanges of vows, are combined with legal procedures that officially transfer the bride from her father's authority to her husband's legal guardianship. But Roman law recognizes different types of marriage arrangements that create different legal relationships between spouses. Marriage cum manu places the wife completely under her husband's legal authority, making her legally equivalent to his daughter. Marriage sine manu allows the wife to remain under her father's legal authority, which can provide her with more protection and independence. The choice between these arrangements affects property rights, inheritance laws, and the legal procedures required if the marriage fails. The wedding documentation must be witnessed by multiple respected citizens who can testify to the legality of the proceedings if future disputes arise. The contracts specify not just the immediate arrangements, but also contingency plans for various scenarios. What happens if one spouse dies? How property will be divided if the marriage is dissolved? What obligations exist toward any children produced by the union? Property ownership becomes particularly complex in Roman marriages because individual ownership rights must be balanced with household management needs and family inheritance traditions. Some property remains individually owned by each spouse, some becomes joint marital property, and some is held in trust for future children or family members. The legal completion of marriage also triggers various civic obligations and opportunities. Married citizens have different tax responsibilities, different eligibility for certain political offices, and different social expectations about their roles in community life. Marriage isn't just a personal relationship, it's a civic status that affects your legal standing in Roman society. And once all the contracts are signed, witnessed, and registered with the appropriate authorities, the real challenge begins: making this legally binding arrangement work as an actual relationship between two people who may still be getting to know each other while managing complex households, extended family relationships, and the social expectations that come with their new status as a married couple in Roman society. So you've listened to your family, followed the social rules, and prepared for a life of respectable arranged partnership with someone whose primary qualification is their father's olive oil holdings. But what if your heart has other plans? What if you're foolish enough to fall in love with exactly the wrong person at exactly the wrong time? Welcome to the dramatic world of Roman romantic rebellion, where passion meets politics and love letters can start civil wars. Roman society produces two types of romantic rebels: the strategically rebellious, who carefully calculate the risks and benefits of defying social expectations, and the catastrophically romantic, who throw caution to the winds and usually end up throwing their entire families into chaos along with them. Let's start with a classic scenario that Roman families dread: a senator's daughter who falls madly in love with a gladiator. Not just any gladiator, mind you, but one of those charismatic arena champions who've become celebrities in their own right. Picture Marcus Aurelius's daughter Lucilla, hypothetically of course, becoming obsessed with a Thracian fighter whose victories have made him famous throughout the empire, but whose social status remains somewhere between entertainer and slave. The initial stages of such forbidden romance require elaborate deception campaigns. She might begin attending the games with unusual frequency, claiming sudden interest in athletic competition while actually timing her visits to coincide with his appearances. She develops friendships with arena personnel who can provide information about his schedule and background. She starts learning details about gladiatorial training and combat techniques, ostensibly for intellectual curiosity but actually to have conversation topics that might interest him. The communication phase requires recruiting accomplices who understand both the romantic appeal and the enormous risks involved. Perhaps a sympathetic slave girl who works in the gladiatorial school agrees to carry messages. Maybe a freedman who manages arena logistics can be bribed to arrange brief encounters in corridors between training sessions. These relationships create networks of complicity that can protect the romance or destroy everyone involved if discovered. But gladiator romance represents just one category of scandalous possibility. Consider the equally dramatic scenario of a young patrician man becoming infatuated with a foreign priestess, say, a beautiful devotee of Isis whose exotic religious practices and independence from Roman family structures make her simultaneously fascinating and completely inappropriate as a marriage partner. Such relationships challenge not just social conventions but religious and political stability. The priestess serves foreign gods whose rituals include elements that conservative Romans consider dangerous or immoral. Her independence from male family authority threatens Roman assumptions about proper gender roles. Her foreign origins raise questions about divided loyalty during military conflicts with her homeland. The rebellion escalates when these relationships move beyond secret attraction toward actual romantic partnerships. Secret marriage ceremonies performed by sympathetic priests create legal complications that can't be easily resolved. If a senator's son secretly marries an Egyptian priestess in a ceremony honoring Isis, is that marriage legally valid under Roman law? Do the children of such unions have inheritance rights? Which legal system takes precedence when the relationship becomes public? Family responses to romantic rebellion vary depending on their political flexibility and social standing. Some families attempt damage control through negotiation, offering financial compensation to inappropriate romantic partners in exchange for their disappearance, arranging hasty marriages to more suitable candidates, or using political influence to have troublesome individuals reassigned to distant provinces. Other families respond with dramatic displays of moral outrage designed to demonstrate their commitment to traditional values. Public disownment ceremonies, formal curses invoking divine punishment, and declarations that rebellious children are no longer considered family members create spectacles that protect family reputation while destroying individual lives. The most sophisticated family responses involve turning romantic scandals into political opportunities. A senator whose son has married beneath his station might use the situation to demonstrate his democratic sympathies and appeal to popular voters. A merchant family might leverage their daughter's romantic connection to gladiatorial celebrity to enhance their own social profile and business opportunities. But some romantic rebellions create consequences that extend far beyond individual families. When politically important people make romantic choices that threaten established alliances, entire networks of family relationships and business partnerships can be disrupted. A marriage alliance between two powerful families might be cancelled because their children have eloped with inappropriate partners, affecting trade agreements, political coalitions and military arrangements that depend on family cooperation. The most legendary romantic rebels become cautionary tales that Roman families use to educate future generations about the dangers of prioritizing personal desire over social responsibility. Their stories are told and retold at family gatherings, often with details that become more dramatic with each retelling, serving as entertainment and moral instruction simultaneously. Yet some romantic rebels succeed in ways that surprise everyone, including themselves. Occasionally, forbidden relationships prove so socially or economically advantageous that families are forced to reconsider their opposition. A gladiator who wins his freedom and becomes wealthy through arena success might suddenly become an acceptable marriage partner. A foreign priestess who provides valuable political intelligence about her homeland's military plans might find her religious practices overlooked in favor of her strategic usefulness. The key factor determining whether romantic rebellion results in tragedy or triumph is often timing. The same relationship that would be scandalous during periods of political stability might become acceptable during times of social upheaval when traditional rules are being reconsidered anyway. But every romantic rebel must understand that their personal choices affect not just their own futures but the stability of social systems that provide order and security for entire communities. Roman society tolerates individual romantic rebellion only to the extent that it doesn't threaten the broader social and political arrangements that keep the empire functioning. So if you're considering romantic rebellion, remember passion might be eternal, but exile is also permanent, and love rarely provides adequate compensation for the loss of family, fortune, and social standing that comes with choosing your heart over your head. Let's talk about the part of Roman romance that nobody wants to discuss at dinner parties, but everyone thinks about constantly: money. Because underneath all the poetry, religious ceremonies, and passionate declarations lies a financial infrastructure so complex it makes modern prenuptial agreements look like grocery lists. Roman marriage isn't just about joining two hearts, it's about merging two economic systems, and every romantic decision carries a price tag that affects generations. The dowry system alone requires financial planning that begins before children can walk properly. Roman fathers start calculating dowry requirements the moment daughters are born because they know that marriageability is directly proportional to the size and quality of the financial package they can provide. This isn't just about having enough money. It's about having the right kinds of assets that demonstrate family status, financial stability, and long-term investment capability. A typical upper-class dowry might include several categories of wealth that serve different strategic purposes. Liquid assets, coined money in gold, silver, and bronze, provide immediate financial flexibility for the new household. Real estate holdings demonstrate permanent wealth and provide ongoing income through rents and agricultural production. Luxury goods like jewelry, fine clothing, and decorative objects showcase family taste and social connections while serving as portable wealth that can be sold during emergencies. But the most valuable dowry components are often the intangible assets that can't be easily quantified: business relationships, political connections, and social networks that provide access to opportunities and protection during difficult times. A dowry that includes introductions to influential merchants, recommendations to political patrons, or memberships in exclusive social organizations can be worth more than cash payments. The timing of dowry payments creates its own financial challenges. Some families provide the entire amount at marriage, requiring them to liquidate investments or borrow against future income. Others negotiate payment schedules that spread the financial burden over several years, but these arrangements require careful legal documentation to prevent disputes if circumstances change. Roman law treats dowry money as a special category of property that belongs nominally to the wife but is managed by the husband during marriage. This creates complex financial relationships where husbands must balance their authority to make investment decisions with their legal obligations to preserve and protect their wives' assets. Successful dowry management requires financial skills that many Roman men are never taught, leading to marital conflicts that are fundamentally about money management rather than romantic compatibility. The bride price system used in some regions and social classes operates according to different financial logic but creates equally complex economic relationships. When grooms pay bride prices to their future wives' families, they're essentially purchasing exclusive access to women's reproductive and domestic labor. The payments compensate families for losing daughters' economic contributions while demonstrating grooms' financial capacity to support households. But bride price negotiations involve more than simple monetary transactions. Families evaluate the long-term economic potential of proposed marriages, considering factors like the groom's career prospects, his family's business connections, and the likelihood that the union will produce economically advantageous relationships for both sides. A lower immediate bride price might be acceptable if the marriage promises access to lucrative trade networks or political opportunities. Wedding expenses create additional financial pressures that constrain family resources for years. Roman wedding celebrations are expected to demonstrate family wealth and social status through elaborate ceremonies that include religious sacrifices, public feasts, entertainment, and gifts for extended networks of friends and associates. The costs of these celebrations often exceed the dowry amounts, requiring families to budget for wedding expenses as separate line items in their long-term financial planning. The most expensive wedding elements are often the ones that provide the least practical value but the most social impact. Hiring famous entertainers, importing exotic foods, commissioning custom jewelry, and providing expensive gifts for wedding guests creates financial burdens that families undertake primarily to enhance their social reputations and create favorable impressions among potential business and political partners. Post-marriage financial management requires ongoing negotiation between spouses who may have different approaches to money management and different priorities for household expenditures. Roman marriages often involve combining separate financial systems that have been managed according to different family traditions, creating opportunities for conflict about spending priorities, investment strategies, and financial responsibilities toward extended family members. Property inheritance laws add another layer of economic complexity to Roman marriages. Children inherit from both parents, but according to different legal procedures that depend on the type of marriage contract, the timing of deaths, and the existence of wills that might modify standard inheritance patterns. Successful Roman families must plan inheritance strategies that balance children's needs with obligations to extended family members and social institutions. Business partnerships between married couples create opportunities for economic cooperation that can enhance family wealth, but they also create risks if the marriage fails or if business decisions create conflicts between personal and professional relationships. Some Roman couples developed sophisticated systems for separating household finances from business operations, while others integrate their economic activities so completely that marital problems automatically become business crises. The economic dimensions of Roman marriage affect not just the immediate families involved, but entire networks of business associates, political allies, and social connections who depend on stable family relationships for their own economic security. Marriage failures can trigger cascading financial effects that disrupt trade relationships, political alliances, and business partnerships throughout Roman society. Successful navigation of these economic complexities requires financial literacy that most Romans acquire through practical experience rather than formal education. Young people learn money management by observing family financial decisions, participating in household budget discussions, and gradually assuming responsibility for managing specific aspects of family economic activities. But even the most carefully planned financial arrangements can be disrupted by economic forces beyond family control. Military conflicts that disrupt trade, political changes that affect property rights, natural disasters that destroy agricultural production, or imperial policy decisions that alter tax obligations and business regulations. Roman families that succeed in managing these economic challenges often do so by maintaining financial flexibility and developing diverse income sources that can withstand various kinds of economic disruption while preserving the family wealth that makes advantageous marriages possible for future generations. Not everyone in Rome follows the traditional path from family-arranged courtship to legally documented marriage with appropriate dowry negotiations. Some Romans find themselves drawn to alternative arrangements that exist in the shadows of respectable society, creating relationships that satisfy emotional and physical needs while operating outside the conventional social and legal frameworks that govern most romantic partnerships. Let's explore the world of Roman concubinage, a semi-official relationship status that allows men to maintain long-term partnerships with women who can't be legal wives due to social class differences, existing marriage obligations, or political complications. Concubinage isn't casual dating. It's a recognized social institution with its own customs, legal protections, and economic arrangements, but one that operates parallel to rather than within the formal marriage system. A typical concubinage arrangement might involve a wealthy Roman citizen maintaining a household with a freed woman, a former slave who has earned or purchased her liberty but whose social status prevents her from becoming a legal wife. This relationship can be genuinely affectionate and committed, lasting for decades and producing children who are acknowledged by their fathers even though they can't inherit full legal status as legitimate heirs. The freed woman in such arrangements often enjoys considerable independence and financial security. She manages her own household, conducts her own business activities, and maintains social relationships within networks of other women in similar situations. Some become wealthy and influential in their own right, using their relationships with powerful men to build commercial enterprises or patronage networks that extend their influence throughout Roman society. But concubinage creates complex emotional and legal situations for everyone involved. The men must balance their official family obligations with their personal preferences and emotional attachments. They might be legally married to socially appropriate wives while maintaining deeper emotional connections with their concubines. They must navigate inheritance laws that favor legitimate children while providing for the welfare of beloved illegitimate offspring. Religious institutions offer another alternative path that attracts Romans who find conventional marriage incompatible with their spiritual or intellectual interests. The priesthood provides respectable alternatives to marriage for both men and women, though the requirements and restrictions vary significantly depending on which deities they serve. Vestal virgins represent the most prestigious religious alternative for women, offering social status, economic independence, and political influence that exceed what most married women can achieve. But Vestal service requires absolute celibacy for 30 years, and violations of chastity vows are punishable by being buried alive. The commitment represents a complete rejection of conventional romantic life in exchange for religious authority and social respect. Male priesthoods offer different kinds of alternatives that range from temporary religious service to lifetime commitments that preclude marriage. Some priestly roles are hereditary positions that provide economic security and social status comparable to successful commercial or political careers. Others involve exotic religious practices imported from conquered territories that attract Romans interested in alternative spiritual and social experiences. Military service creates its own category of alternative arrangements that affect romantic possibilities for significant portions of the male population. Roman soldiers are legally prohibited from marrying during their 25-year terms of service, but they're not expected to remain celibate. Instead, they develop informal relationship patterns that include temporary partnerships with local women in garrison towns, long-term arrangements with camp followers who provide domestic services, and occasional romantic connections with women from the territories where they're stationed. These military relationships often develop their own customs and traditions that operate independently of civilian social rules. Veteran soldiers who complete their service sometimes formalize these relationships through legal marriage, but others maintain their informal arrangements while using their military bonuses and land grants to establish entirely new romantic partnerships that enhance their post-service social status. The entertainment industry provides alternative social spaces where different romantic rules apply. Actresses, dancers, musicians, and other performers often maintain relationships that cross social class boundaries in ways that would be scandalous in other contexts. The theatrical world creates its own social networks where talent and artistic achievement can sometimes overcome traditional status limitations. Some performers become mistresses to wealthy patrons who support their artistic careers while maintaining emotional relationships that blur the lines between professional and personal attachment. Others use their entertainment careers as stepping stones to more conventional marriages with men who are attracted to their artistic abilities and public recognition. Gladiatorial culture creates perhaps the most unusual alternative romantic opportunities in Roman society. Successful gladiators can achieve celebrity status that makes them attractive to women from social classes that would normally be completely inaccessible. Some gladiators develop relationships with wealthy women who are drawn to their physical prowess, public fame, and the danger associated with their profession. These relationships often involve elaborate arrangements where women provide financial support for gladiators' training and equipment while receiving emotional and physical companionship that their official marriages don't provide. The relationships must be conducted secretly because of the social scandal they would create, but they sometimes last for years and involve genuine emotional attachments on both sides. Philosophical schools and intellectual communities provide alternatives for Romans who prioritize mental and spiritual compatibility over conventional social arrangements. Some philosophical traditions encourage relationships based on shared intellectual interests rather than family alliances, creating partnerships that emphasize emotional and intellectual intimacy over economic or political considerations. These alternative arrangements demonstrate that Roman society, despite its elaborate social rules and legal restrictions, actually accommodates a wide variety of romantic and sexual relationships that meet different emotional, economic, and social needs. The key is understanding which alternatives are socially acceptable, which are tolerated but not acknowledged, and which carry serious risks for participants who choose passion over conventional respectability. So you've followed all the rules, signed all the contracts, and entered into a perfectly respectable Roman marriage with someone whose family owns sufficient olive groves and whose astrological chart suggests compatibility. Everything should be wonderful, right? Time for a reality check that's going to hit harder than discovering your dowry was invested in a failed gladiator school. Roman marriages fail, and when they do, your options for dealing with the situation range from grim to catastrophic. Let's start with the most common problem: fundamental incompatibility between spouses who barely knew each other before their wedding day. You might discover that your husband has a gambling addiction that makes him unsuitable for managing household finances. You might realize that your wife considers reading a form of dangerous intellectual rebellion and refuses to allow books in the house. You might find that your spouse's definition of appropriate social behavior differs dramatically from your family's expectations. In modern terms, you'd consider divorce. In Roman terms, divorce exists but operates according to rules so complex they make military logistics look simple. Divorce requires either mutual consent between spouses or sufficient legal grounds that can be proven before witnesses and documented for future reference. The process involves untangling financial arrangements, determining child custody, and managing social consequences that affect entire extended family networks. But here's the cruel reality. Even when divorce is legally possible, it's often economically or socially catastrophic for one or both spouses. Women who divorce lose their dowries if they can't prove their husband's fault, and they return to their father's households with diminished marriage prospects and reduced social status. Men who initiate divorce proceedings must return dowry assets that they may have invested in business ventures or spent on household expenses, potentially facing financial ruin. So most Romans develop elaborate coping mechanisms for dealing with marital dissatisfaction that don't involve the legal system. The most common strategy is simple endurance combined with the pursuit of satisfaction outside the marriage relationship. Spouses learn to maintain civil public relationships while leading essentially separate private lives that minimize contact and conflict. Wealthy Romans have advantages in managing unhappy marriages because they can afford physical separation without legal divorce. Husbands might spend months at country estates while wives remain in city houses, creating arrangements that provide independence while maintaining the fiction of marital unity. They can maintain separate social circles, pursue different interests, and essentially live as unmarried individuals while remaining technically married. The development of sophisticated household management systems allows unhappy spouses to minimize direct interaction while maintaining functional domestic operations. Slaves and freedmen become intermediaries who handle communication between spouses, manage shared financial responsibilities, and coordinate household activities without requiring the married couple to spend time together. Some Romans develop passionate emotional relationships outside their marriages that provide the companionship and intimacy that their legal partnerships lack. These affairs operate according to their own social rules and expectations, creating parallel relationship systems that can last for decades while the participants remain officially married to other people. The key to successful extramarital relationships lies in understanding which types of affairs are socially tolerated and which are potentially scandalous. Men are generally expected to have relationships with women of lower social status, slaves, freed women, or actresses that don't threaten their wives' social positions or their children's inheritance rights. Women's extramarital options are more limited, but some develop relationships with men from their own social circles that operate within accepted boundaries of discretion and mutual protection. Religious and philosophical pursuits provide another category of coping mechanism for Romans trapped in unsatisfying marriages. Some throw themselves into religious devotion, using temple activities and spiritual practices to find meaning and community outside their domestic relationships. Others pursue intellectual interests that provide emotional satisfaction and social connection through philosophical schools, literary circles, or artistic communities. The patron-client system creates opportunities for emotional fulfillment through relationships that combine personal affection with social and economic functions. Some Romans develop close friendships with their clients or patrons that provide the loyalty, respect, and emotional support that their marriages lack, creating alternative family-like relationships that operate within acceptable social boundaries. Child rearing becomes both a source of conflict and a potential solution for unhappy marriages. Some couples find that their shared commitment to their children's welfare provides sufficient common ground to maintain functional relationships despite personal incompatibility. Others discover that disagreements about child rearing intensify their marital problems and create additional sources of conflict. The most sophisticated Romans develop what might be called strategic emotional management techniques that allow them to extract whatever satisfaction is possible from imperfect situations while minimizing damage to their social standing and economic interests. They learn to appreciate their spouse's positive qualities while accepting their limitations, to find fulfillment through relationships and activities that don't threaten their marriages, and to maintain social appearances that protect their families' reputations. Some unsuccessful marriages eventually stabilize into partnerships based on mutual respect and shared practical interests rather than romantic love. Spouses who initially disliked each other sometimes develop genuine affection through years of cooperation in managing households, raising children, and navigating social and economic challenges together. But the harshest reality of the Roman marriage system is that some people simply never find satisfactory solutions to their relationship problems. They remain trapped in marriages that provide neither happiness nor the possibility of escape, enduring decades of frustration while maintaining the social fiction that their arrangements represent successful family life. The Roman response to this reality is characteristically practical. They develop social and cultural mechanisms that make endurance possible and sometimes even dignified, while acknowledging that individual happiness is less important than social stability and family continuity across generations. Death, divorce, and dramatic changes in fortune create unexpected opportunities in the rigid world of Roman romance. Sometimes the social barriers that seemed permanent suddenly dissolve, offering second chances to people who thought their romantic stories were finished. Welcome to the surprisingly dynamic world of Roman relationship transitions, where tragedy can become opportunity and social mobility can rewrite the rules of who gets to love whom. Widowhood represents the most common pathway to romantic liberation in Roman society. When spouses die, and given the realities of ancient medicine, warfare, and childbirth, this happens frequently. The survivors often find themselves with freedoms they've never experienced before. For women especially, widowhood can be simultaneously devastating and liberating, offering independence that married life never allowed. A young widow with children and inherited property suddenly becomes one of the most sought-after marriage candidates in Rome, but now she has significantly more control over her romantic destiny. Roman law gives widows considerable authority over their own remarriage decisions, especially if they're past childbearing age or if their inherited wealth makes them economically independent. For the first time in their lives, some women can choose partners based on personal preference rather than family strategy. But widowhood also creates complex emotional and practical challenges that affect romantic possibilities. A widow must balance grief for her deceased husband with practical needs for companionship, economic security, and social protection. She might feel guilty about romantic attraction to new partners, especially if her first marriage was genuinely happy. She must consider how remarriage will affect her children's inheritance rights and her relationships with her deceased husband's family. The timing of widow's remarriage becomes a subject of intense social scrutiny. Too quick, and she appears callous or desperate. Too long, and people begin to suspect there's something wrong with her that prevents suitable men from proposing. Roman society has developed elaborate guidelines for appropriate mourning periods that balance respect for deceased spouses with practical recognition that widows need new partnerships for economic and social survival. Widowed men face different but equally complex challenges in second marriages. Roman fathers are expected to remarry quickly to provide maternal care for their children and household management that they can't accomplish alone. But second wives must navigate relationships with stepchildren who may resent their presence, extended family members who remain loyal to deceased first wives, and social networks that compare them unfavorably to idealized memories of their predecessors. Some second marriages become legendary for their unexpected happiness. Couples who marry later in life, having learned from earlier relationship experiences, sometimes develop partnerships based on genuine compatibility and mutual respect rather than family obligation. They bring emotional maturity, realistic expectations, and appreciation for companionship that young people entering first marriages rarely possess. Military veterans returning from long campaigns often find their romantic situations dramatically changed. Young men who left Rome as unmarried soldiers return as mature adults with money, land grants, and social status that make them attractive marriage candidates. But they must readjust to civilian social rules after years of military life that operated according to very different behavioral expectations. Some veterans discover that sweethearts they left behind have married other men, forcing them to begin romantic pursuits from scratch with women who may be initially suspicious of their military backgrounds. Others find that their families have arranged marriages during their absence, leaving them to develop relationships with spouses they've never met, but who have been waiting years for their return. Economic transitions create another category of second chance romance. Successful merchants, lucky investors, and skillful artisans sometimes accumulate enough wealth to elevate their social status, opening romantic possibilities that were previously impossible. A freedman who builds a profitable business might suddenly become marriageable to families that previously ignored him completely. But upward social mobility in romance requires more than just money. Newly wealthy Romans must learn the cultural codes, social behaviors, and relationship customs of their new social class. They need to develop appropriate social networks, demonstrate cultural sophistication, and convince established families that their wealth represents permanent status rather than temporary luck. Political changes also create romantic opportunities and challenges that can transform individual situations overnight. Imperial succession, civil wars, and major policy shifts can elevate some families while destroying others, creating a constantly shifting landscape of romantic possibilities that depends on political developments beyond anyone's personal control. Some Romans who lost status during political upheavals find their romantic prospects improving when political winds shift in their favor. Others discover that relationships they thought were secure become impossible when their family's political loyalties are questioned, or when new laws restrict marriage between certain social categories. The most successful second chance romances often involve people who've learned to balance romantic idealism with practical wisdom gained through life experience. They understand the importance of emotional compatibility, but also appreciate the value of financial security, social stability, and family harmony. They've learned to distinguish between temporary infatuation and lasting affection, and they're better equipped to navigate the complex social and legal requirements that successful Roman marriages require. But second chances in Roman romance also carry unique risks. Remarried people must manage relationships with multiple extended families, children from previous marriages, and social networks that may have conflicting loyalties and expectations. They must balance respect for past relationships with commitment to new ones, and they must navigate inheritance laws and property arrangements that become increasingly complex with each additional marriage. The key to successful second chance romance lies in understanding that experience can be an advantage rather than a liability, that maturity can enhance rather than diminish romantic possibilities, and that the social flexibility created by life transitions can provide opportunities for happiness that weren't available during youth, when choices were controlled entirely by others. Before you finalize any romantic decisions in ancient Rome, you'd better consult the gods, check your horoscope, examine various body parts for suspicious marks, and possibly sacrifice a chicken to determine whether the universe approves of your choice in partners. Because Roman romance isn't just subject to social rules and family politics, it's also governed by divine forces, supernatural influences, and mystical considerations that can override even the most practical marriage negotiations. Let's start with astrology, which Romans take seriously enough to influence major life decisions, including marriage timing and partner selection. Professional astrologers maintain detailed charts tracking planetary movements, celestial alignments, and zodiacal influences that supposedly determine romantic compatibility. Before families finalize marriage arrangements, they often consult these specialists to ensure that the bride and groom's birth charts suggest harmonious relationships rather than cosmic disaster. The positioning of Venus at the time of your birth affects your entire romantic destiny, according to Roman astrological theory. If Venus was favorably positioned when you were born, you're blessed with natural charm and likely to attract suitable marriage partners. If Venus was in conflict with other planets, you might struggle with romantic relationships throughout your life, requiring special rituals and offerings to overcome celestial disadvantages. Mars influences affect romantic passion and sexual compatibility, while Mercury governs communication between spouses. Jupiter's position determines the likelihood of producing healthy children and maintaining prosperous households. Saturn's influence can delay marriages, create obstacles to romantic happiness, or indicate relationships that will be stable but emotionally challenging. But astrology is just one layer of mystical consideration that affects Roman romantic decisions. Physiognomy, the interpretation of physical features as indicators of character and destiny, plays a significant role in evaluating potential marriage partners. Roman families examine prospective spouses for physical signs that reveal personality traits, health prospects, and compatibility indicators that might not be obvious through conventional social interaction. Facial features carry particular significance in these evaluations. A broad forehead suggests intelligence and leadership ability. Strong jawlines indicate determination and reliability. Eye color and shape provide information about emotional temperament and trustworthiness. Even the way someone walks, gestures, or holds their head during conversation is analyzed for clues about their suitability as marriage partners. Birthmarks and scars receive careful examination because they're believed to represent messages from the gods about individual destiny. A mark shaped like a particular symbol might indicate divine favor or warning. Scars from childhood accidents could suggest either courage or carelessness, depending on their location and circumstances. Some families employ specialists who can interpret these physical signs and provide guidance about romantic compatibility based on bodily markings. Religious omens affect romantic timing and decision-making in ways that can override family preferences and social considerations. If the sacred chickens refuse to eat before a proposed wedding ceremony, that's considered a divine warning against the marriage. If lightning strikes during engagement negotiations, families might postpone arrangements until more favorable supernatural conditions develop. Dreams carry enormous significance in Roman romantic culture because they're believed to provide direct communication from gods and spirits about relationship matters. A dream featuring Venus might indicate divine approval for a romantic relationship. Dreams about deceased family members could represent ancestral guidance about marriage choices. Nightmares involving weddings or specific individuals might warn against proposed romantic arrangements. Professional dream interpreters maintain detailed knowledge about the symbolic meanings of various dream elements and their implications for romantic decisions. Some families refuse to proceed with marriage negotiations until they've received favorable dream guidance, while others seek divine intervention through special prayers and offerings designed to produce helpful dream messages. Curse tablets and love magic represent the darker side of Roman supernatural romance practices. Some people attempt to influence romantic outcomes through magical spells, potions, and rituals designed to attract desired partners or eliminate romantic rivals. These practices operate in legal and social gray areas because they're officially discouraged but widely practiced. Love magic might involve creating binding spells using hair, clothing, or personal objects from desired romantic targets. Curse tablets calling on underground deities to punish romantic rivals are deposited in wells, graves, and temple foundations throughout the Roman world. Magical potions designed to enhance attractiveness or create passionate attraction are prepared by specialists who maintain detailed knowledge about herbs, minerals, and ritual procedures. Regional religious traditions add additional layers of mystical consideration that vary depending on geographic location and cultural background. Egyptian magical practices, Greek mystery religions, and Germanic tribal traditions all contribute elements to Roman supernatural romance culture, creating complex hybrid systems that combine multiple mystical approaches. Seasonal festivals and religious calendars affect romantic timing according to divine preferences about when certain activities should and shouldn't be conducted. Some months are considered particularly favorable for weddings and engagement ceremonies, while others are believed to bring bad luck to romantic relationships. The timing of religious observances, imperial celebrations, and traditional festivals all influence when families schedule important romantic events. The most sophisticated Roman families develop comprehensive approaches to supernatural romance management that combine multiple mystical systems while maintaining flexibility to adapt when circumstances change. They consult astrologers, examine physical signs, interpret dreams, monitor omens, and time important decisions according to religious calendars that maximize divine favor while minimizing supernatural risks. But even the most careful supernatural planning can't guarantee romantic success because the gods are notoriously unpredictable and human hearts remain stubbornly independent despite all attempts at mystical management. Roman romance ultimately depends on navigating both practical social realities and mysterious spiritual forces that shape individual destinies in ways that no amount of planning can completely control. And so we reach the end of our journey through the labyrinthine world of Roman romance, where love navigated between marble columns and legal documents, where passion was filtered through family politics and divine approval, where the human heart persisted in wanting what it wanted despite emperors, astrologers, and extremely opinionated mothers-in-law. After all these hours exploring the elaborate systems that Romans created to control, channel, and commercialize romantic relationships, one truth emerges as clearly as Venus rising over the seven hills: love found a way. Not easily, not simply, and certainly not without enormous complications, but it found a way nonetheless. Behind every carefully negotiated marriage contract, there were moments when arranged spouses discovered they actually enjoyed each other's company. Beneath the surface of strategic family alliances, genuine affection sometimes bloomed between partners who had been thrust together by circumstances beyond their control. Within the constraints of social surveillance and religious oversight, people found ways to express tenderness, loyalty, and passion that transcended the practical arrangements that brought them together. The letters that survived from ordinary Roman couples reveal something that all the legal documents and family negotiations couldn't capture: the small daily intimacies that make relationships meaningful regardless of how they began. A husband writing to his wife about missing her conversation during a business trip. A woman describing her pride in her spouse's accomplishments to a friend. Parents working together to provide opportunities for their children that they themselves never had. These glimpses of authentic emotion remind us that Romans were dealing with the same fundamental human experiences that people navigate today. The desire for companionship, the need for emotional security, the hope that someone will understand and accept them completely, the fear of loneliness, and the complex challenge of building lasting partnerships with imperfect people in an imperfect world. The elaborate social systems we've explored, the surveillance networks, the economic negotiations, the religious considerations, the class restrictions, weren't designed to prevent love. They were designed to channel it in directions that supported social stability, economic prosperity, and political order. The Romans understood something that modern romantic culture sometimes forgets: individual relationships don't exist in isolation but as part of larger social networks that depend on successful partnerships for their own survival and prosperity. But within those systems, Romans developed remarkable sophistication in understanding relationship dynamics that remain relevant across centuries. They recognized that successful partnerships require more than just romantic attraction. They need shared values, compatible life goals, complementary skills, and the ability to weather external pressures that can destroy even the most passionate relationships. They understood that marriage involves not just two individuals, but entire extended networks of family, friends, and social connections, whose support or opposition can significantly affect relationship success. They developed elaborate courtship rituals that allowed people to evaluate potential partners' character, social skills, and family compatibility before making permanent commitments. Most importantly, they created cultural mechanisms that helped people find meaning and satisfaction within imperfect situations. The Roman emphasis on duty, honor, and social responsibility provided frameworks for building relationships based on mutual respect and shared commitment, even when passionate love wasn't the foundation. The philosophical traditions that Romans inherited and developed offered sophisticated approaches to managing expectations, accepting limitations, and finding fulfillment through virtue and wisdom, rather than just emotional satisfaction. Stoic teachings about accepting what you cannot control while focusing energy on what you can influence provided practical guidance for navigating relationship challenges. Yet throughout all these systematic approaches to romance and marriage, the human heart retained its capacity for rebellion, surprise, and transformation. Roman literature is filled with stories of people who defied social expectations for love, who found passion in unexpected places, who discovered that the partners their families chose turned out to be perfect matches, or who created meaningful relationships despite starting with completely practical arrangements. The gladiator who won freedom and married a senator's daughter, the slave who earned liberation and built a successful business that attracted a patrician bride, the arranged marriage that blossomed into legendary devotion, the forbidden romance that somehow survived family opposition and social scandal to become an accepted part of the community. These stories persisted because they represented possibilities that Romans wanted to believe in, even when their own experiences were more constrained. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Roman romance is how people learned to find love within systems designed to control it. They discovered that meaningful relationships could develop under any circumstances if people approached them with patience, wisdom, and genuine commitment to each other's welfare. The Roman approach to love reminds us that romance isn't just about finding the right person, it's about becoming the kind of person who can build lasting relationships with imperfect partners in challenging circumstances. It's about learning to balance individual desires with social responsibilities, personal happiness with family welfare, romantic idealism with practical wisdom. And in the end, despite all the contracts and negotiations, the surveillance and restrictions, the astrological consultations and divine omens, Romans discovered what people in every era learn: the human capacity for love, loyalty, and genuine partnership transcends any system designed to contain it. Love, it turns out, is wonderfully, persistently, eternally disobedient to anyone who tries to completely control it, even in the greatest empire the world has ever known.